Heart muscle, the heart as a pump and function of the heart valves. With this chapter, we begin discussion of the heart and circulatory system. The heart, shown in figure, is actually two separate pumps, a right heart that pumps blood through the lungs and a left heart that pumps blood through the peripheral organs. In turn, each of these hearts is a pulsatile two-chamber pump composed of an atrium and a ventricle. Each atrium is a weak primer pump for the ventricle, helping to move blood into the ventricle. The ventricles then supply the main pumping force that propels the blood either through the pulmonary circulation by the right ventricle or through the peripheral circulation by the left ventricle. Special mechanisms in the heart cause a continuing succession of heart contractions called cardiac rhythmicity, transmitting action potentials throughout the heart muscle to cause the heart's rhythmical beat. This rhythmical control system is explained in chapter 10. In this chapter, we explain how the heart operates as a pump, beginning with the special features of heart muscle itself. Physiology of cardiac muscle. The heart is composed of three major types of cardiac muscle: atrial muscle, ventricular muscle, and a specialized excitatory and conductive muscle fibers. The atrial and ventricular types of muscle contract in much the same way as skeletal muscle, except that the duration of contraction is much longer. Conversely, the specialized excitatory and conductive fibers contract only feebly because they contain few contractile fibrils. Instead, they exhibit either automatic rhythmical electrical discharge in the form of action potentials or conduction of the action potentials through the heart, providing an excitatory system that controls the rhythmical beating of the heart. Physiologic anatomy of cardiac muscle. Figure shows a typical histological picture of cardiac muscle, demonstrating cardiac muscle fibers arranged in a lattice work with fibers dividing, recombining, and then spreading again. One also notes immediately from this figure that the cardiac muscle is striated in the same manner as in typical skeletal muscle. Further, cardiac muscle has typical myofibril that contain actin and myosin filament, almost identical to those found in skeletal muscle. These filaments lie side by side and slide along one another during contraction in the same manner as occurs in skeletal muscle. But in other ways, cardiac muscle is quite different from skeletal muscle, as we shall see. Cardiac muscle as a syncytium. The dark areas crossing cardiac muscle fibers in figure are called intercalated discs. They are actually cell membranes that separate individual cardiac muscle cells from one another. That is, cardiac muscle fibers are made up of many individual cells connected in series and in parallel with one another. At each intercalated disc, the cell membranes fuse with one another in such a way that they form permeable communicating junctions, gap junctions, that allow almost totally free diffusion of ions. Therefore, from a functional point of view, ions move with ease in the intracellular fluid along the longitudinal axis of the cardiac muscle fibers, so that action potentials travel easily from one cardiac muscle cell to the next, past the intercalated disc. Thus, cardiac muscle is a syncytium of many heart muscle cells in which the cardiac cells are so interconnected that when one of these cells becomes excited, the action potential spread to all of them, spreading from cell to cell throughout the latticework interconnections. The heart actually is composed of two syncytium. The atrial syncytium that constitutes the walls of the two atria, and ventricular syncytium that constitutes the wall of the two ventricles. The atria are separated from the ventricles by fibrous tissue that surround the atrioventricular AV valvular openings between the atria and ventricles. Normally, potentials are not conducted from the atrial syncytium into the ventricular syncytium directly through this fibrous tissue. Instead, they are conducted only by the way of a specialized conductive system called the AV bundle, a bundle of conductive fibers several millimeters in diameter that is discussed in detail in this chapter. This division of the muscle of the heart into two function syncytiums allow the atria to contract a short time ahead of ventricular contraction, which is important for effectiveness of heart pumping.